Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of, reading and other things that have been going on in my life and bookish kind of things. I thought this week what I'd do primarily is just kind of do a wrap-up for the month of May, and then a TBR for June, and then just talk about a few other things. So here we go. So I had a really good reading month in May. I don't know why, but I was inspired to read a lot more books than I normally read. Partly this is because of the BookTube prize, and I judged the nonfiction. Excuse me, I judged the translated fiction group B this time, and surprisingly, all three of the books that I chose to be 1, 2, and 3 are the three books which went on to the semifinals. I guess that's something good, but I have to be honest with you, and I said this in my BookTube prize review wrap-up video, which I'll link at the end of this video. I said in that video that that I really was kind of underwhelmed by the books in my group. And there were two of the books that, one of the books I actively dislike, another book I just didn't think was very good, even though many people disagree with me who I respect, and that's perfectly fine. The choice for my third and the fourth book came down to I just liked the writing in one more than I liked the other things in the other. And to be honest with you, on a different day I might have chosen a different book 3 and 4. My top two books though were pretty solid for me. Disquiet was number 1, and then More Than I Love My Own Life was my number 2. Of the 6 books though, really only one I thought was outstanding. But anyway, 3 of them went on, and happy to see that and look forward to that. Like I said, if you want to see more of my thoughts on the BookTube prize book reading, then please go to at the end of the video, you'll find a link to that video. This was also May of the Moderns, hosted by Margaret Pinard, in which she kind of puts together challenges where you're supposed to kind of read books that were published between, I think, around 1900 and 1945, the kind of the period of modernism in the United States and the rest of the world. And she put together 5 prompts, 5 challenges, and I read for all of those, even though one of my books counted for more than one. So one of the categories, or one of the prompts, had to do with sex, and for that I buddy read Nightwood by Gina Barnes. This was a reread for me. I buddy read this with Stephanie Cohen. That was really delightful, and in some ways it was kind of reaffirming that I wasn't crazy, that in lots of ways large parts of this book just really don't make sense, and the two different things the author Barnes tries to accomplish don't necessarily work really well together. For me, the love story, the story of longing and loss, which is really at the heart of the book, and in some ways, kind of autobiographical, was the strong part of the book. And the more modernist elements of the book, the parts about the doctor, were really kind of less successful, and I thought just kind of, too self-consciously modernist and arty. For the topic of war, which is the prompt that I provided, I read Under Fire by the French writer Henry Barbusse, which was just excellent. A really long book. Really, Barbusse was a soldier who was at the front in the early days of World War I, and just a really visceral experience reading that book, but also really kind of, I think, insightful the experience that World War I soldiers had in not only what they witnessed at the front, but in their inability to communicate that to people behind the lines. I also, though, wanted to kind of contrast the story of, a book by someone who was actually a soldier in World War I with somebody who wasn't. And so I also read A Son at the Front by Edith Wharton. This is my second Wharton novel, and I really should read more Wharton, because I just think she is an excellent craftsman in creative characters and detail and scene. And, to me, she's like as detail-oriented and as scene-setting and as mood-creating and as character depth creating as Henry James, without all the kind of irritating things that I find that go along with Henry James. But I also read A Son at the Front, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed it, but there is a definite contrast between the people who were not at the front, who were at the front, and their views of the war and what the war was all about. For the imperialism prompt, which I believe was suggested by Roz from Scallydailing About the Books, I finally got around to reading A Passage to India by Ian Forster. I've had this book on my shelf for a long time. It really does, I think, show Forster as somebody who is probably more progressive in his thinking in terms of being aware of how bad colonialism was, imperialism was. At the same time, he can't escape stereotyping and a lot of the imperialist things that would have been common at the time period he includes here as well, which, probably is fair considering when the book was written. I know a lot of people think that for a lot of people this is their favorite Forster book, and they think it's beautiful. I have to be honest with you, I thought it was good. I didn't think it was anywhere near the same league as Howard's End or Maurice or Morris. But I did like it, and I did read that. And then the last prompt was The Other, and we're supposed to read something in translation. Well, Henri Barbusse's novel Under Fire is translated from the French, so that I counted that for that as well. Had a great May of the Moderns. Thanks to Margaret for putting that all together and for letting me be on and doing kind of a live chat and let me kind of ramble on about things I like to talk about on her channel. That was really great. So, you know, I'll leave a link to her channel down below, and you can find all kinds of May of the Modern stuff, and I would encourage you to participate in that next year. Oh, I forgot one. One of the prompts had to do with race and kind of race relations of the past through today, and I read Cain by Jean Toomer, which I really just thought was great. Now, this is a book I consumed on audio, and in a way, listening to it on audio, I thought was better than it might have been reading it, because the rhythm of the sentence and the pacing of this novel, which really is very lyrical in its construction, I thought worked really, really well as an audiobook. And I just liked it. It was complex. It was at times confusing. It was disturbing. It could be beautiful. It was asked a lot of hard questions. It didn't really let you in any way kind of feel settled or like, okay, these are the good people or these are the bad people. It was really great. The fellows over at the Codex Cantina, I think, did a video about this, which I'll try to remember to link down in the show notes below, because I think they did a great job of talking about that book. You may also know from my channel that I have been kind of reading at the books that are on the Republic of Consciousness Prize 2022 long list. They've already given the prize away to a book I haven't read, but I want to continue reading that. So some of my June books are from that list as well, but I did read one book from the Republic of Consciousness Prize, and that was The Beast They Turned Away by Ryan Dennis. This book is set in Ireland, and I believe it's Ireland more or less modern times, and it involves an old man, a curmudgeon would be a kind word for him, I think, an old man who has more or less adopted a stray little boy who is definitely different. The stray little boy wears a cow skull around pretty much all the time, and the villagers blame the little boy for a lot of the bad luck the village is having. The old man carries around a hurl with him, you know, the stick they play, I guess it's hurling, which I think is the national sport of Scotland. He carries a stick around with him, and he can be violent. He commits acts of violence against animals, so be forewarned about that. And the story in some ways I think is really interesting because it kind of parallels the story of Cuchulainn from Tun Vo Cooling, which is the kind of one of the great epics, great medieval Irish epics, and it kind of parallels that story, and I think the old man definitely sees himself in the role of Cuchulainn, and that comes through in the story, and so I really liked it. I think I liked it more than Bob, the booker, who also read it. He did a great review of the book, and I'll try to remember to leave a link to his video down below as well, because I think, you know, you should always go and look at people who are smarter than me and what they have to say about these books. Speaking of kind of epics, I read the Volsanga, or with Jack, the Rambling Rocking Tour this month, which is kind of a Germanic saga involving a lot of characters who you may know from kind of German folk stories and things like that. And that was really enjoyable and action-packed. I don't have a lot of experience in reading those, so getting to read that with Jack was just great. And then I also read the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, which, you know, is one of those graphic novels I think a lot of people see as being excellent and kind of a good introduction to graphic novels. I'm not a big reader of graphic novels. I've read very few, and I really enjoyed it. I have a feeling that some of the things you're supposed to get from the graphic novel kind of missed me, and I've only read the first volume of that and not the others, but I will attempt to read some of the others. And then I also, right at the end of May, I continue my kind of project to eventually read all of the works of Louise Erdrich by reading Future Home of the Living God, which is an interesting book, kind of a near-future dystopian novel about climate change causing essentially the de-evolution of life on Earth, including humanity, and then this kind of pressure this puts on pregnant women and government's efforts to round up pregnant women and see if they're giving birth to babies that are, you know, one evolutionary step below where humanity is, or trying to preserve those babies who are on the same evolutionary level. To be honest with you, the science and the dystopian part of it is kind of confusing. It's not really explained, I don't think, completely. You kind of pick up pieces as you go along. In some ways, it reminded me of Children of Men by P.D. James. In some ways, it reminded me of what I've heard about The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, but I've never read that book. But it reminded me of those things. And so I didn't think it was particularly great, even though there was a lot of things in it which I thought were kind of markers of Erdruch's work. Really interesting, complex characters, kind of this blending of indigenous people's culture and ideas, and those people and their lives with mainstream non-indigenous American life, and kind of the friction and the kind of connection points there. But I didn't think it was an incredibly successful novel, but I did read that. So there you go. That's a really long May wrap-up, because like I said, I read an unusual number of books for myself. So June, which has already started, you'll be seeing this on, what, June the 4th? June is Pride Month, and I do have a Pride Month reading TBR. I'm going to try to get all of those books from the library. By the way, if you notice, I wasn't holding up a lot of books. It's because this month in May, I checked out a lot of books from the library to read for the BookTube Prize, and then I read a lot of audiobooks, or consumed a lot of audiobooks through LibriVox. And so I didn't actually buy a lot of books in May. And that kind of, I think, made me feel better. And I've really been making more use of my library. So this month I'm also planning on getting my Pride Month TBR from my local library, if that works out. The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles, which I've had recommended to me several times. I believe Sean the Book Maniac is a big fan of that. I've heard him talk about it. I also want to read The Death of Vivek Oji by Kweke Emeze. That would be my second book by Emeze. And then The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is one of those kind of really prolific and productive authors who I just like. I think she tells an entertaining story in a really arch way. And so I'm looking forward to reading that book as well. June began the Summer of Snopes. Faulkner in August, the Summer of Snopes. If you don't know what that is, every summer a group of us read a William Faulkner novel. This is the 4th annual Faulkner in August. Usually we read that novel in August, but this year we're reading the 3 novels that make up the Snopes trilogy by William Faulkner, starting with The Hamlet this month, The Town in July, and then The Mansion in August. If you want to get in on that, again, you can contact Una or at Codex Cantina, or Alan, Big Hard Books and Classics, Roz, Scallygandling About the Books, Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. I'll try to remember to leave a link to their channels down below. You can contact them and they can add you to the Voxer group. It's a really relaxed read this year, where we're just kind of going along at our own pace, just trying to read each book in each month, and then kind of adding our thoughts to the Voxer group as we go along. So I'm doing that, and I've gotten started on reading that book. Let's see. I'm also going to be buddy reading The Right to Sex by Amiya Srinivasan. I'm also going to be reading The Right to Sex by Amiya Srinivasan. I'm buddy reading that with Ami, 1649, open parentheses, close parentheses. I can never remember his channel name, but Ami contacted me about that. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I believe that I saw that Britta had read and reviewed that book. I don't remember exactly what she said, and I'll probably avoid looking at a review again until after I read it. But those are some of the books I plan to read. And then I have 2 other books from the Republic of Conscience Prize that I want to read that I have copies of. Our Lady of the Nile by Scholastique Mukasanga. And then I want to read Somebody Loves You by Mona Archie. I have those 2 books. Neither one is particularly long, so I'm hoping to be able to fit them in around the edges. In terms of the book I've been writing since essentially I've had this channel, I did get the manuscript back from the editor, who I sent it to for her thoughts and ideas, and there are a lot of markups, so I had a lot of work to do to get that in shape. I'm always embarrassed when I get something back from somebody who edits my stuff at how big a mess I made and how much work they had to do, and I'm very appreciative of that work, and I'm excited to get to that stage and then finish up the other things I've been doing. I got the timelines completed. I've done some of the endnotes that I needed to catch up on, and right now I'm really kind of working on trying to create maps, however rudimentary they are, so I can give those to any prospective publisher as well, from which I'm sure they'll be able to do much better than I, if I'm lucky enough to have somebody agree to publish it. So I've had that going on as well. Of course, here in Texas and in the United States of America, we are still grieving over the mass shootings that have taken place. Buffalo, Uvalde, there's one in Ames, Iowa yesterday, I believe, and it's really important that we all speak out and try to stop gun violence. I believe Stop Gun Violence Day is Friday of this week, so that'd be the day that I'm filming, and it's important that we put pressure on our politicians to do something about gun violence. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen lots of them. And one of the things I worry is that that Democrats and President Biden, by asking for or pushing for too much, are going to end up with nothing. And there are two ways of looking at this. Do you go for the whole thing, the assault weapons ban, the ban on large capacity clips, raising the age to buy a gun, waiting periods, universal background checks? You go for all of that at once, or you go for some of that piecemeal. And I have thoughts about that. But one of the things I wanted to make sure I say is those of us who are opposed to these weapons being on the streets in the hands of so many people and people having so many access to them, one of the things I think is important is that whatever our elected officials come up with, we have to get behind that and push. And it may only be an incremental change, but even an incremental change at this point would seem like a major achievement, since there has been no real successful gun control legislation since the expiration of the assault weapons ban under President Clinton. Now, what I'd like to see is an assault weapons ban which bases the ban on essentially just two things, and that's muzzle velocity. By the way, the longer the barrel of a gun, the higher the muzzle velocity usually is, so that would include rifles. Without us having to define what is and is not a rifle, we could define muzzle velocity somewhere around 2,200 feet per second, I think would be the line to draw, and then the combination of muzzle velocity with semi-auto status. That those two things combined should be enough for us to be able to create a list of weapons that we no longer allow to be sold in the United States of America. That would be what I would like for us to focus on, but I'm going to get behind whatever our elected officials come up with, because we have to start making changes, and even if those changes are small, we have to start making them. Anyway, there you go. There's my Saturday Hodgepodge for this week. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.